YouTube, what is up? James, MTG Biggie here, and I'm just here with a little bit of a sort of random topics kind of video. I'm going over a quick update to a deck tech that I've done before. This is the standard deck I am currently playing. I'm actually playing it tomorrow at a PPT Queue. I'm recording this on a Saturday. I'm going to schedule it so it goes up while I'm playing the PPT Queue. So if you happen to be at the PPTQ I'm at, hopefully you won't see this video till after that PPTQ. However, if you're not, and you're interested in a deck to play in Standard that I think is really well positioned and underappreciated at this very moment, and overall since it's been a deck in Standard, I think you will enjoy this video. I'm also going to go over quickly some changes to Modern Death and Taxes that I've made. I've tuned that deck several different ways. Before the previous video I made on it was the build with Aven Mind Sensors that was going all in on kind of messing up the big mana decks, because there's a lot of those decks in my meta locally. But I made some adjustments and actually really enjoy them so far. So I'll go over that as well briefly, and just talking about YouTube and Magic and some other stuff. So there's not going to be a rigid structure to this video. It's just going to be sort of a couple topics and then some other things that I could think off the top of my head and talk about. But getting into it, let's talk about Standard, and let's talk about the deck I'm playing tomorrow in the PPT Queue here in Newport Richey, Florida at E&D Games. Shout out to E&D Games, one of the best game stores around in my area. Good people, good friends of mine. And they're putting on finally a PPTQ on a Sunday where I could take the day off and go play. So wish me luck, guys. This is what I'm doing. I'm doing blue-white cycling again. The last PPTQ I played, I top 8'd with this. I officially came in 4th, losing in the quarterfinals, or semifinals rather, to the blue-white God Pharaoh's Gift deck, which I feel is a bad matchup for my deck, but I've made some adjustments that'll hopefully bring me some percentage points closer. As far as the main deck goes, the only real adjustments that I'm on is I've upped the number of main deck countervailing wins to 3 total, and then I have trimmed on Abandoned Sarcophagus to just 1 in the main deck, and then 1 Dejero's Renunciation, and then I've upped it to the full 4 Hieroglyphic Illumination. The deck previously was playing 3 of these, had 2 of these, had just 1 of these, and 2 of these. So that's the changes to the main deck, just more of a controlling build, more straightforward, straight-up control. Our main deck win condition is still 4 of Drakehaven, and then the 1 Sarcophagus. This card is very powerful in our deck, but it's bad in multiples, and we don't need this card to win the game oftentimes. We could just kind of grind them out with Drakehaven. And the other change I've made, we're still on 24 lands, but we trimmed 1 land for an Arch of Orazca. This land, I think, is pretty good in games where we're going long, which is going to be a lot of the games, hopefully, if we have anything to say about it. I feel like it's worth having around. We're not playing a lot of permanents to the board aside from Azcanta, Drakehaven, and our Sarcophagus, but our cast-outs count toward it, as does our one of Ixalan's Binding. So we can get the City's Blessing, not quickly, but eventually we will have it. And it's nice to have a utility land that does something significant in the late game, allows us to pull ahead even further from our opponents, because we're going to filter a lot of our draws just by cycling naturally. And then if we get this card into play, we can actually have card advantage, which is very nice. This actually combines well. We can activate this as opposed to the Search for Azcanta, or in addition to, in the very late game, and just have a wealth of card filtering and drawing at our disposal. Now, the changes in the deck where I feel it will be a better match against the God Pharaoh's Gift deck, are a couple pieces. Obviously, we have negates in the sideboard. Negate is good in any control mirror. This will allow us to hopefully counter the refurbishes that happen to try to stop them from getting Godfarer's Gift online. But then the other card we have is Sentinel Totem, which is like a bad relic of Progenitus as a 2-of. It'll allow us to exile some graveyard, or both graveyards, and try to stop them and slow down their plan. We do have graveyard synergies ourselves with the Abandoned Sarcophagus. So in this matchup, I'm actually looking to maybe sideboard out the Sarcophagus, or we could use this after we've accrued some value if we're not sideboarding out. I'm not sure the exact plan as far as what we're taking out, but I definitely want to bring this in against that deck just to slow down its graveyard and to try to allow us to pull ahead with Drakehaven. Also notable that this card is very good against the Scarab God. We don't have a lot of targets in our deck at all for the Scarab God to exile and take, but they can take their own creatures, so I'm interested in bringing this in against those matchups. And just various other corner cases where it's good. It also costs 1 mana and allows us to have a Scry, so it's a very small investment for a very bad matchup for us. So I'm looking forward to utilizing that, and Forsake the Worldly, which allows us to exile Godfarer's Gift. So in that matchup, we're at least boarding in 6, maybe 8 cards if we want to up it to disallow as well. In addition to trimming some of our main deck win conditions, we can cut back on the Drakehaven plan, and we can board in more creatures. Stuff like that allows us to be a little more flexible in that matchup, which I think is important. Obviously, we're going to board in our Settle the Wreckage as well. We may take out, like, the Jarrow's Renunciation doesn't do a ton against them. We could trim on Renewed Faiths or Censors, just for more hard counter spells. We could trim on Drakehavens. We have a lot of options. Like I said, Abandoned Sarcophagus when the totem comes in is very good. The other new card from Rivals of Ixalan I'm trying is Zorn Lobringer. Now, I'm interested in this card a lot. This is the one of tech that I've brought in for control decks that are not playing Ravenous Chupacabra. I want to bring this in against decks like Approach of the Second Sun, which I expect to be there in some number. And even in the mirror, if other people are playing blue-white cycling, I like the idea of having a big finisher so I could play kind of the tap-out control game where we could board into some more hard counters, board this guy in, and kind of take advantage and win the game that way. I think this card isn't incredible because of the Chupacabra, but it's situational enough, and I think good enough in those situations where we could pull way ahead of some decks and start Sphinx's Revving on every time we attack with it, which is pretty sweet. I'm not 100% on it, but I think it's worth giving a shot. So we're going to try it. I think this is very easily a spot where we can have a second Gear Hulk. The only trouble with Gear Hulk in this deck is that the decks that sideboard against us to hate out Drakehaven and Abandoned Sarcophagus side in enchantment and artifact removal, like Naturalize, things like that. And those things happen to kill Gear Hulks as well, which is kind of a bad look. Even if we board out some of our Drakehavens or Sarcophagus or whatever, they have a lot of targets for Naturalize anyway with our Cast Outs of Ixalan's Binding. So they're bound to bring those in. And if we're playing Gear Hulks, we can Gear Hulk back something, and that's great. But they can just naturalize a Gear Hulk, and we're without a win condition now. So I think Azor is a little bit more diverse in that manner. Also, we're going to want them to be boarding out things like Ravenous Chupacabra, if they have it. So when they board that out, knowing that we don't have any main deck creatures really except for the Curators, that's when we board in the Azor, and they sit there and look at this big 6/6 flyer and not know what to do. We're also on 2 Regal Caracals. This is just the aggro sort of tech of choice. I was on Sunscourge Champions before. I didn't really board them in a lot, and when I did, like, they were decent, but not incredibly overwhelming. And then the one of here, we have a farm to market, which a lot of decks are playing it in the main deck. I think this could be in place of the Renunciation, but it does not cycle, although the Aftermath side of it allows us to draw and pitch for value. So it's a one of. I'm not sure it's going to stay in the sideboard. I may trim this and perhaps the 4th Settle the Wreckage or the Ixalan's Binding for the for 2 of the new Oblivion Ring that gives them a 3/3 if it leaves play. I'm not entirely sure, but as of right now, this is where I'm at. There may be some adjustments made in the final hour before we get into it, but that's where we're at for now. That's what I'm doing at the PPT Queue, so if I see you at the PPT Queue, hopefully I scheduled this video properly so you don't see it before we play. Other than that, moving on, I'm going to talk about Modern a little bit. Those of you who know that I had the Death and Taxes tech a few weeks back, that I had pivoted that deck to be able to beat the big mana decks, and it did very well against them. I was able to beat Scapeshift and Tron multiple times in between the filming of that video and now. But then I've gone back and I made a different change to the deck that I wanted to try. In the Death and Taxes communities on Facebook, especially in Modern, there's a big discussion of specific tech, and one card came up that I never tried out, and I got to try it this past week, and it was very good, and that is Standard All-Star, and banned in Standard, too powerful for Standard, Smuggler's Copter. So what I've done with the deck is I trimmed the 2 Aven Mind Sensors, and I've put in 2 Smuggler's Copters. This card's very powerful. I really enjoyed how it played. I was able to beat Esper Death Shadow, rather, with a pretty insane clock that I was able to put on them with this card. It not only gets crewed and synergizes well with Thraben Inspectors, but it allows our Blade Splicers to do something after we cast them and get golems off of them. It's not often you get to attack with a Blade Splicer. They just sit there and kind of wait for somebody to target them so you can resto them. Now we have something we could do. We could crew our Copter and get in for 3 and get a much quicker clock than we had before on our opponents. And that is a thing that Death and Taxes struggles with sometimes in various formats. Sometimes you're not putting them under enough pressure with what you're doing to close the game out quickly before they get to their obviously more powerful things that they're planning on doing. I mean, clearly Gurmag Anglers and Death Shadows and stuff like that are really powerful. And if we're just sitting there dawdling around on the ground and we can't really attack effectively into these cards, there's a chance that they eventually find that removal, find that terminate, or the Kolaghan's command they needed to take out a Splicer and a token, or take out an Aether Vial and a guy or whatever. And then we kind of slowly lose the advantage and can eventually lose the game. Well, now with the Looter Scooter, we can put them on a real clock really quickly, and they can't really deal with flyers effectively. The match I played against Esper Death Shadow, my opponent was not playing Lingering Souls, which felt really weird. He was on Geist of Saint Traft instead, which is a definitely good card, but not anything that we can't deal with. That card has a really hard time attacking into Thalia and various other golems and ground creatures and stuff like that. So with the lack of Lingering Souls, we were able just to fly overhead with Copters and Restos and Flicker Wisp and really put them under a lot of pressure quickly. The card is really good, I think. I know it's anti-synergy with Thalia, Guardian of Thraben. It makes it cost 3, but as a 3-drop, this card's still pretty good. Noteworthy to mention, since we are sideboarding 4 Stony Silences, we now have a lot of stuff to take out of our deck in matches where we want those cards. Usually it was 4 Aether Vials out, 4 Stonies in, but now we have to find some other stuff to take out for the Smuggler's Copters, because that's pretty embarrassing. So in the matchups where we are boarding in Stony, we're boarding in some other number of things also, just to take out the Copters so we have something more effective. But that's it for the Death and Taxes update. The deck is still great. I think it's one of the best decks in Modern that nobody's playing, and I think it has a lot of play left to it, and I'm really surprised that nobody is really pushing it with this deck, at least in the sense of it being a top-tier deck that we see at SCG Opens and at GPs everywhere. It had its time in the sun a little bit last year, where it did very, very well. I think the deck never got bad. It never got hated out, but people started pivoting elsewhere, and I think that you could really surprise some folks with it and take over a good-sized tournament because you have a ton of play. So that's that on Death and Taxes. I'm quickly going to go over my my YouTube updates here and welcome everybody who's been by and subscribed. I actually gained like 60 some odd subscribers over the last week or so. The channel is growing very rapidly, but we're still so far from where we need to be, it's not even funny. Obviously, the change is coming up the 20th of February, so we have less than a month now to really try to get there. And we're trucking along well. I am hopefully going to be able to work with some other creators and maybe work with some other people in the community to try to help each other, promote each other. For those who didn't catch my last video, I started a Twitter for the channel, the official Twitter, as well as an email address and a Facebook group. So I'm going to link all of those down below. The Twitter's very easy. It's at MTGBiggie. So look for that. Definitely hit me up on Twitter if you have any questions, concerns, anything like that, or you just want to chat about Magic or whatever the case may be. But we're moving along pretty well. We still got a long way to go, but I look forward to the grind and to getting to where we need to be. Beside that, things are going pretty well with the channel and with Magic in general, and I want to welcome everybody who's jumped on since then. I'll link the announcement video from the channel that I made previous to this video down below at the end. If you're new here and you haven't yet, check that out. You're going to want to know about that. We're doing, if we hit the threshold by the 20th, and I know it's a long shot, but I think we could do it, I'm going to do a huge giveaway on the channel after February 20th. And a huge thank you to everybody. I'm going to probably be getting some booster packs, some deck boxes, maybe some single cards. I'm not entirely sure what we're going to do. I may either do that and put together like a little bundle to give to the winner, or I may just go buy a booster box, and we will give that booster box to one lucky winner here who has been following the channel and who has been paying attention and has been a part of the community. So check that video out. You'll find out exactly how we're going to do that once we hit the threshold or whatever. But other than that, guys, I appreciate everything. That's all I have for tonight. Wish me luck for the PPT Queue tomorrow. If I go there and I win it and I qualify for the RPT Queue, you'll hear a video about that very soon, and I'll have a huge smile on my face. But if not, I'll still probably talk about it in a video coming up, so look out for that. And I appreciate all of you very much, and I look forward to hearing from you all very soon.